Chicago in late September carries a particular kind of beauty. The wind rolls off Lake Michigan and pushes through the downtown streets like it owns every corner. The sky above the river sits low and silver, pressing the city's glass towers into sharp outlines against the clouds. If you stand on Michigan Avenue early enough in the morning, before the traffic fills in, you can hear the water slapping against the Riverwalk and the L train rattling somewhere overhead. It is a city built for ambition. And ambition is exactly what brought Zara Mitchell here. Zara was 23 years old. She stood 5'6" with deep brown skin and tightly coiled black hair she usually pulled into a neat bun for work. Her eyes were dark and sharp, the kind that noticed everything in a room before most people noticed her. She had high cheekbones inherited from her mother and a small scar just above her left eyebrow from a fall she took as a child running through the stairwell of a housing project on the South Side. She was not loud, she was not flashy. But when Zara Mitchell walked into a room, she walked in like she had earned the right to be there, because she had. She grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Harlem before her father moved them to Chicago when she was 9. Her mother, Denise Mitchell, died of cancer when Zara was still in elementary school. She remembered the hospital hallways more than the funeral. She remembered her father sitting in a plastic chair beside the bed, holding her mother's hand without saying a word. After Denise passed, Marcus Mitchell raised Zara alone. Marcus was 55 now, a tall man, broad-shouldered but slightly stooped from years of sitting behind a steering wheel. He drove a city bus, Route 63 on the South Side, and he did it 3 shifts a day, morning, afternoon, night. His hands were rough, his knees ached when it rained, but every evening when he came home, no matter how tired he was, he asked Zara the same question. "What did you learn today?" That question carried her all the way to a full scholarship at Northwestern University. 4 years of business administration, top of her class, and now a position she had fought tooth and nail to earn, an internship at Sterling Enterprises. Sterling Enterprises occupied floors 40 through 52 of Sterling Tower, a massive structure of glass and steel standing tall along the Chicago River. The lobby alone was large enough to make a person feel insignificant. White marble floors, ceilings 3 stories high, and a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. The company dealt in real estate and technology. Billions of dollars moved through its walls every quarter. And at the very top of that tower sat a man the press had nicknamed the Ice Prince. Ethan Sterling, 32 years old, 3rd-generation heir to the Sterling Empire. He was tall, just over 6 feet, with a lean frame that looked like it had been built more by discipline than by any gym routine. His hair was dark brown, always neatly combed back, and his jaw was sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes people remembered. Grey, pale grey like winter sky over the lake. Those eyes never softened, they never warmed. When Ethan Sterling looked at someone, it felt less like being seen and more like being measured. In the 2 years since he had taken over as CEO, Ethan had fired 3 vice presidents, cancelled dozens of million-dollar contracts, and restructured entire departments without a single word of explanation. He did not raise his voice, he did not argue, he simply decided and people obeyed. The business world respected him, most of his employees feared him, and nobody, not a single soul in that building, claimed to actually know him. That was the world Zara Mitchell walked into on a Monday morning in September. By her 3rd day, she had already memorized the layout of every floor she was allowed to access. She was assigned to the operations division on the 44th floor, where interns answered phones, organized files, and generally tried to become invisible. Zara did her work quickly and without complaint. She had not spoken to anyone above her direct supervisor. She had certainly never been to the top floors. Until Thursday afternoon. Her supervisor, a balding man in his 40s named Greg, who always smelled faintly of tuna sandwiches, handed her a thick stack of financial documents bound in a navy folder. "Take these up to 52, he said. without looking up. "Leave them with the executive assistant." Zara took the folder. 52? Greg glanced at her briefly. "The restricted floor, CEO's level. Don't touch anything, don't talk to anyone. Just drop them off and come back." She nodded. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Zara pressed the button for 52. The doors closed. The numbers climbed. 45, 46, 47. Then, at floor 51, the elevator shuddered. The lights flickered once, and the doors opened. Zara blinked. She was not on 52. The hallway in front of her was dim. Warm amber light glowed from recessed fixtures along the walls, casting soft shadows on dark hardwood floors. There was no reception desk, no assistant, no signs. Just a long, quiet corridor that ended at a single heavy door made of dark oak. Zara stepped out carefully. She assumed it was a system error. The building was old enough to have occasional glitches. She thought perhaps the executive offices extended to this floor as well. She walked toward the oak door. It was slightly open. She pushed it gently. The room behind that door was nothing like any office she had ever seen. It was enormous, nearly the size of a basketball court, with tall windows running along the far wall overlooking the river. But instead of desks and monitors, the room was filled with art. Dozens of oil paintings hung across every wall. Landscapes of forests and coastlines. Portraits of strangers. Abstract pieces that swirled with color and emotion she could almost feel radiating from the canvas. In the center of the room, an easel held a half-finished painting, the silhouette of a woman standing before a window, afternoon light pouring through her hair. It was breathtaking. Zara moved deeper inside. On a wooden table near the easel, she found stacks of sketch journals, jars of old oil paint, and brushes worn down to their handles. She picked up one of the journals. Page after page of drawings. Detailed, intimate, raw. Then she noticed the signature in the corner of each painting. Small, careful. 2 letters, E.S. Ethan Sterling. Zara's breath caught. She turned toward a portrait near the back wall, an older woman with sad, knowing eyes. The brushwork was delicate, almost tender, clearly painted by someone who loved this subject deeply. Zara leaned closer, trying to understand how the coldest man in Chicago could have created something so full of warmth. Then the door behind her slammed shut. She spun around. Ethan Sterling stood in the doorway. His white dress shirt was rolled to the elbows. There was a smear of blue paint across 2 fingers of his right hand. His grey eyes locked onto her instantly, and whatever warmth those paintings carried was nowhere in his expression. "Who are you?" he said. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. The words landed like a blade laid flat against skin, not cutting yet, but letting you know it could. "And what are you doing in my room?" Zara stood frozen. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The folder of documents was still clutched against her chest. She opened her mouth to explain the elevator, the error, the door that was already open. But no words came out, because in that moment, standing between the paintings and the man who made them, Zara Mitchell understood something no one else in that building knew. The Ice Prince was not made of ice at all. He was made of paint and grief and secrets he had hidden from the entire world, and now she had seen every single one of them. Ethan Sterling did not yell. That was the first thing Zara noticed. She had braced herself for fury, for a raised voice, a slammed fist, the kind of explosive anger she had seen from men in power who felt their territory had been violated. But none of that came. Ethan simply stood in the doorway of floor 51, his paint-streaked fingers hanging loosely at his sides, and looked at her with those pale grey eyes that gave away absolutely nothing. The silence between them stretched for what felt like an entire minute. The paintings on the walls seemed to hold their breath alongside her. "You saw something," he said finally, "that no one in this company is allowed to know exists." Zara's mouth opened. The words tumbled out quickly. the elevator malfunction, the wrong floor, the door that was already cracked open. She was not snooping. She was not spying. It was an accident. Ethan listened without moving. When she finished, he tilted his head slightly, the way a man studies a document he has already decided to reject. "The reason does not matter," he said quietly. "The result does." Then he walked past her, picked up a cloth from the wooden table beside the easel, and wiped the blue paint from his fingers without looking at her again. "Go back to your floor," he said. "Do not speak about this room to anyone. I will decide what happens next." Zara left floor 51 with her legs shaking beneath her. For the next 2 days, she waited for the axe to fall. She arrived at work early, sat at her desk on the 44th floor, and completed every task with mechanical precision while her mind ran through every possible outcome: fired, blacklisted, escorted out by security. She imagined calling her father to explain why the opportunity she had spent 4 years earning had disappeared in a single afternoon because of a broken elevator. On Saturday morning, while Marcus Mitchell was driving his second shift on Route 63, he pulled the bus to the side of Halsted Street and sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. His chest ached. Not the sharp kind, but the slow, heavy kind that had been settling deeper over the past few weeks. He reached into his jacket pocket and unfolded the letter from Rush University Medical Center. The words had not changed since the first time he read them. Abnormal mass, left lung. Additional testing required. Estimated treatment cost, surgery plus chemotherapy, $180,000. Marcus folded the letter again carefully and placed it back in his pocket. He had already started selling things: the old television, Denise's sewing machine that he had kept in the closet for 14 years, a set of tools he no longer used. He told himself he was just clearing out space. He had contacted 2 medical assistance programs. Both had waiting lists longer than his patients. That evening, Zara called from her small apartment near Logan Square. "How are you feeling, Dad?" she asked. Marcus Mitchell leaned back in his chair and smiled into the phone. "Just a little tired, baby girl. Weather's been changing." His voice carried the same warmth it always did. But when he hung up, his hand trembled against the arm of the chair, and he sat alone in the quiet apartment for a very long time. On Monday morning, Zara found an email waiting in her inbox. No subject line, no greeting, just one sentence: "Floor 52, 9 a.m., ES." She rode the elevator expecting to collect her things. The doors opened onto the 52nd floor, the real executive level. The space was vast and deliberately minimal: polished concrete floors, floor-to-ceiling glass walls that framed the entire Chicago skyline, the river bending south, the Wrigley Building catching morning light, Lake Michigan stretching endlessly beyond. A single desk sat in the center of the room, black walnut, nearly empty except for a laptop and a small glass paperweight that caught the light like a piece of frozen water. Ethan Sterling sat behind it. He wore a charcoal suit today, no tie. His dark hair was combed back precisely, and his expression carried the same unreadable calm she had seen on floor 51. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Zara sat. Her hands stayed flat on her lap to keep them from fidgeting. Without a word, Ethan slid a document across the desk. It was thick, 20 pages bound in a dark grey cover. Zara looked at it but did not touch it. "What is this?" she asked. "Read it," Ethan said. She opened the first page. The title read, "Special Executive Assistant, Confidential Employment Agreement." As she turned the pages, her confusion deepened. The contract stated that Zara Mitchell would be transferred immediately from the general internship program to a new position reporting directly to the CEO. The title, Special Assistant to the Chief Executive Officer, did not appear anywhere in the company's official organizational chart. Her responsibilities would include managing undisclosed scheduling, handling private procurement requests, and maintaining absolute confidentiality regarding all activities observed during the course of employment. In exchange, she would receive a salary 5 times her current intern stipend comprehensive medical insurance for herself and one immediate family member, and upon successful completion of the contract term, a personal letter of recommendation, written and signed by Ethan Sterling. Zara read the final clause twice. Breach of confidentiality would result in immediate termination and legal action. She looked up. "And if I refuse?" Ethan's expression did not change. "Then you leave this building within the hour," he said, "and I personally ensure that no company in this industry hires you for the next 5 years." The words were spoken without malice. They were spoken the way someone states the time of day or the temperature outside, as simple, unavoidable fact. And Zara understood, sitting in that glass office above the city, that Ethan Sterling was not bluffing. He had the power, he had the reach, and he had no reason to show mercy to a 23-year-old intern who had accidentally stumbled into the one place he kept hidden from the world. She thought about her father. The night shifts, the aching knees, the way he always asked what she had learned. She thought about the medical bills that might come, the ones Marcus had not told her about yet, but that she somehow sensed the way daughters sometimes sense the things their fathers try hardest to hide. She thought about 5 years of closed doors, 5 years of rejection letters, 5 years of watching the opportunity she had built her entire life around dissolve because of a malfunctioning elevator. Zara picked up the pen. She signed. The first week changed everything. Ethan did not explain. He instructed. On Tuesday, he handed Zara a handwritten note with an address in Lincoln Park, a small art supply shop called Brennan's, tucked between a bakery and a dry cleaner on a street most people walked past without noticing. Windsor and Newton oil paints, the note read, the following colors only. A list of 12 specific shades followed. Do not order online. Do not use a company card. Pay cash. Do not tell them who it is for. Zara went that afternoon. The shop owner, an elderly man named Arthur Brennan, 72, with wire-rimmed glasses and paint permanently embedded under his fingernails, looked at her list and smiled. "Same order as always," he said. "Your boss has good taste." Zara did not ask how he knew. She paid cash, carried the bag back to Sterling Tower, and left it on the table outside the elevator on floor 51 without a word. On Wednesday, Ethan told her to rearrange his calendar so that every Tuesday and Thursday evening between 7 and 9 was blocked. "Label it as private strategy review," he said. "It does not go into the shared system. It does not appear on any assistant's screen." Zara understood. Those were the hours he painted, the hours the ice prince allowed himself to be human. By Friday, Zara had begun to see the shape of her new role clearly. She was not a secretary. She was not an advisor. She was the gatekeeper, the single person standing between Ethan Sterling's public empire and his private world, the only space where he still felt something other than control. Across the building, someone else had also noticed the change. Victoria Lane sat in her corner office on the 48th floor, the Public Relations Division, reviewing a social media report when her personal assistant, a nervous young man named Derek, knocked twice and entered. Victoria was 28 years old, the kind of woman whose beauty operated like architecture, precise, calculated, and designed to intimidate. She had honey blonde hair that fell in perfect waves to her collarbone, sharp blue eyes framed by lashes she maintained religiously every 2 weeks, and a jawline that photographers loved. She dressed exclusively in fitted designer pieces. Today, a cream Valentino blouse tucked into high-waisted black trousers, and she moved through the Sterling offices with the quiet authority of someone who believed the building would eventually bear her name. Her father, Richard Lane, had been a business partner of the Sterling family for nearly 2 decades. In Victoria's mind, her place beside Ethan was not a question of romance. It was inheritance. "The intern," Derek said carefully. "Zara Mitchell. She's been moved." Victoria looked up slowly. "Moved where?" Derek swallowed. "Directly under the CEO, new title, special assistant. It happened Monday. Victoria said nothing for a moment. She set down her pen. Find out her schedule, she said. Every floor she visits, every hour she stays late. Derek nodded and left quickly. Victoria turned back toward the window. 48 floors above the city, her reflection stared back at her, composed, beautiful, and already calculating. Meanwhile, 14 miles south, in a rented office above a parking garage in Bridgeport, a man named Nathan Cross leaned back in his leather chair and read a report his assistant had placed on his desk that morning. Nathan was 45, stocky, square-jawed, with thinning brown hair combed over a wide forehead and small, sharp eyes that always seemed to be appraising something. He had built Titan Realty from a single strip mall investment into a company worth $400 million, and he had done it by knowing things about people before they knew he was watching. The report on his desk contained one interesting detail. Sterling Enterprises had quietly reassigned an intern named Zara Mitchell to a direct report position under the CEO, a position that did not officially exist. Nathan circled the name with a red pen. He did not yet know why it mattered, but Nathan Cross had built his career on the principle that anything Ethan Sterling tried to hide was worth finding. 3 weeks passed inside Sterling Tower and something shifted. It did not happen all at once. It happened the way ice thins on a lake in early spring, slowly, invisibly, until one morning you realize the surface that once held everything rigid has started to give way beneath its own weight. Zara Mitchell had settled into her role as Ethan Sterling's special assistant, with the same quiet discipline she brought to everything else in her life. She arrived before him every morning. She completed every request precisely on time, without complaint. She learned his coffee order, black, no sugar, from the espresso machine on the 52nd floor, never from the lobby cafe. And she memorized the rhythm of his days the way a musician memorizes tempo, meetings at 9, calls at 11. Lunch alone at his desk, always the same thing, a plain turkey sandwich he barely touched. And then the evenings, the Tuesday and Thursday evenings that belonged to floor 51, to the paints, to the silence, to whoever Ethan Sterling became when no one was watching. In the beginning, he treated her exactly the way she expected. Orders came in short, clipped sentences. The Lincoln Park order today. Move the Thursday call to 3. The door on 51 needs a new lock. Handle it. Do not use building maintenance. He never said thank you. He never asked how she was doing. He never looked at her longer than necessary. Zara was a function to him, a lock on a door, a wall between his secret and the world. And she accepted that. She had signed a contract. She would honor it. But Zara Mitchell was not the kind of woman who shrank under silence. She did not flinch when Ethan's tone turned cold. She did not rush to fill uncomfortable pauses with nervous chatter the way his previous assistants apparently had. She learned this from Helen Park, the 59-year-old head of building administration, a compact Korean-American woman with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses perpetually perched on her nose, who had worked at Sterling Tower longer than anyone and who told Zara during a quiet lunch in the break room that Ethan had gone through 4 executive assistants in 2 years. "They all quit," Helen said, stirring her soup. "He doesn't yell. That's the problem. He just goes quiet and people can't stand the silence." Zara listened and nodded. She could stand silence. She had grown up in it. The silence of a house after a mother dies, the silence of a father too tired to talk after his 3rd shift, the silence of being the only black girl in a lecture hall of 200 students at Northwestern. Silence was not her enemy. It was familiar. The turning point came on a Tuesday night in the 4th week. Ethan had requested coffee at 8:30. Unusual, since he typically did not ask for anything during his painting hours. Zara rode the elevator to 51, carrying a single cup on a small tray. She knocked once. No answer. She pushed the heavy oak door open carefully. The studio was lit by the warm amber lamps along the walls, and a single standing light angled toward the easel in the center of the room. Ethan sat on the wooden stool before the canvas. A brush rested in his right hand, but his arm hung motionless at his side. He was staring at the painting in front of him, the portrait of the older woman, the same woman Zara had seen during her first accidental visit. The brushwork around the eyes was exquisite, tender, in a way that seemed almost painful. Whoever this woman was, Ethan had painted her not from reference, but from memory. The kind of memory that lives in the chest, not the mind. Zara set the coffee on the table quietly. She should have left. The contract was clear. Deliver what was requested. Do not linger. Do not ask questions. But something in the stillness of the room stopped her. Ethan had not moved. He had not acknowledged her presence. He simply sat, staring at the face on the canvas with an expression she had never seen on him before. It was not cold. It was not controlled. It was grief. "Your grandmother?" Zara asked softly. The question broke something open. Ethan did not answer immediately. 10 seconds passed. 20. Zara almost apologized for overstepping. Then his voice came, and for the first time since she had met him, it carried no edge. "My mother," he said. "She died when I was 14. The words fell into the room like stones dropped into still water, sending quiet ripples through the silence. Zara did not move toward the door. Instead, she sat down slowly on the paint-stained wooden bench a few feet from the easel. "My mother died when I was 9, she said. "Cancer. I remember the hospital more than the funeral." Ethan turned his head slightly. Not all the way. Just enough to see her from the corner of his eye. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan said, "I remember the phone call. My father answered it in his study." He closed the door. When he came out, his face looked exactly the same as before. "He told me to go to bed." He paused. "He never mentioned her again." That was the night Ethan Sterling spoke honestly to another human being for the first time in nearly 18 years. He told Zara about Eleanor Sterling, his mother. She had been a watercolorist before she married Harrison Sterling. She painted landscapes of the Michigan coastline, quiet pieces full of light and patience. She was the one who put a brush in Ethan's hand when he was 6 years old. She was the one who told him that making something beautiful was never a weakness. When Eleanor died in a car accident on Lake Shore Drive, a rainy night, a truck that ran a red light, Harrison Sterling buried his grief inside the company and demanded his son do the same. "He told me painting was a pastime for soft men," Ethan said, the bitterness finally surfacing in his voice like something long held underwater. "So I hid it, all of it. I built this room so I could keep the only thing she gave me." Zara looked at him steadily. "You are not weak," she said. "You are the strongest person I have ever met, because you kept painting when the whole world told you to stop." Ethan stared at her. The studio was silent, except for the faint hum of the building's ventilation system and the distant sound of wind pressing against the windows 51 floors above the river. He did not respond to her words, but something behind his eyes shifted. A door cracking open, just barely, just enough to let a sliver of light through. After that night, the change was unmistakable. Ethan stopped issuing commands and began asking questions. "What do you think of this color?" he said one Thursday evening, holding up 2 shades of cerulean. Zara, who knew nothing about oil painting, gave her honest opinion. Ethan nodded and used the one she chose. He started bringing her coffee when she worked late at the desk outside his office, setting it down without a word, but always with the lid already removed, because he had noticed she preferred it that way. If anyone in the company had witnessed this, Ethan Sterling, the Ice Prince, personally delivering coffee to a 23-year-old intern, they would not have believed it. But no one saw. That was the nature of their world. It existed only between the two of them, inside elevators and empty hallways and a secret room filled with paint. And then there was the painting. the half-finished canvas Zara had seen on her first night, the silhouette of a woman standing before a window, bathed in afternoon light, had remained untouched for weeks. But after that Tuesday conversation, Ethan began working on it again, slowly, carefully. The silhouette gained detail, curly black hair, straight shoulders, a warm, quiet smile. Zara did not see the painting during this time. Ethan kept it turned toward the wall whenever she entered the studio. But Ethan knew what he was doing. He was painting the first person who had made him feel something warm since the day his mother died. Zara, meanwhile, was discovering the man behind the mask through small, almost invisible details. She learned from Helen Park in administration that Ethan quietly funded 3 elementary schools in underserved neighborhoods on the South Side. No press releases, no donor plaques, just monthly wire transfers that only the chief accountant knew about. She noticed that he remembered the name of every janitor in Sterling Tower, Raymond on the night shift, who had a daughter starting community college, Maria on weekends, who brought homemade tamales every Friday and always left one on the security desk. And every evening before Ethan left the building, Zara noticed he would stand in front of his mother's portrait for a long, still moment, his lips sometimes moving faintly, as though speaking to someone only he could see. The Ice Prince, Zara realized, was simply a lonely man who had protected his heart by pushing the entire world away. And she, without meaning to, without planning it, had somehow gotten through. But the world outside their quiet bubble was not standing still. Victoria Lane had been watching. For 3 weeks she had tracked Zara's movements through the building with the methodical patience of a woman who understood that power was not seized. It was assembled piece by piece until the moment was right. Derek, her assistant, a thin, anxious man of 25 who owed his position entirely to Victoria's recommendation, reported weekly. "She stays past 11 on Tuesdays and Thursdays," he told Victoria one morning, his voice barely above a whisper. "Always goes to the upper floors. Always alone." Victoria did not react immediately. She waited until the following Thursday. At 11:14 that night, she stood in the parking structure across the street with her phone raised. Through the glass lobby, she watched Zara Mitchell step out of the executive elevator. Click. The photo showed the timestamp, the floor indicator, and Zara's unmistakable silhouette against the lobby lights. Within 48 hours, whispers began circulating through Sterling Enterprises. They started in the break room on the 46th floor and spread downward like water through cracks. "The new intern, the black girl, she's sleeping with Sterling." Zara heard them first in the restroom, 2 women from the marketing department talking by the sinks, their voices dropping when she opened the stall door. She saw it next in the elevator, a group of junior analysts who glanced at her, then at each other, with the kind of knowing smirk that required no words. She felt it in the cafeteria, where a seat that had been empty beside her was suddenly occupied by no one, meal after meal. Zara swallowed the pain. She did not cry at work. She did not confront anyone. And she did not tell Ethan, because she refused to let him think she was weak. On the South Side, Marcus Mitchell's condition was getting worse. The coughing had deepened over the past 2 weeks. Twice he had tasted blood in the back of his throat while driving the bus, and both times he had pulled to the curb, pressed a handkerchief to his mouth, and waited until it passed before continuing his route. He had lost 7 pounds. His uniforms hung looser on his frame. One evening, Zara called during her walk home from the L station. "Dad, are you okay? You sound different." Marcus cleared his throat carefully. "Breathed in some dust on the route today, baby girl. Old bus, bad vents." He laughed lightly. Zara hesitated. Something felt wrong, but she let it go. That night, after the call ended, Marcus lay in his bed in the quiet apartment and stared at the framed photograph on the nightstand. Denise Mitchell smiled back at him. Young, beautiful, full of the life that had left her too soon. Marcus placed his hand flat against the glass. "I'll hold on a little longer, Denise," he whispered, "for our girl." And then the flowers arrived. It was a Friday morning. Zara was reviewing Ethan's schedule at the desk outside his office when a delivery courier appeared carrying an arrangement of white roses in a crystal vase. "Zara Mitchell?" the courier asked. She frowned and signed for them. A small card was tucked among the stems. She opened it. He opened. The handwriting was precise and confident. "I hope next time you will say yes. Nathan Cross." Zara had received an invitation the previous week to a networking event hosted by Titan Realty. She had declined without a second thought. She was too busy, and the name Titan Realty meant nothing to her. But apparently Nathan Cross did not accept refusals easily. She placed the vase on the corner of her desk and returned to work. 20 minutes later, Ethan stepped out of his office. He paused. His grey eyes moved to the flowers immediately, the way a man notices something in a room that was not there before. He did not ask who sent them. He did not say a word. But Zara saw it. Just for a moment, something flickered behind the pale grey calm of his expression. It was brief, it was sharp, and it looked very much like jealousy. Ethan turned away and walked toward the elevator without speaking. The doors closed behind him. Zara stared at the roses. She did not know Nathan Cross. She did not know why he had sent them, but she understood, with a quiet instinct she could not yet name, that those flowers had just changed something inside Ethan Sterling, something he was not prepared to feel. Everything broke on a Wednesday. It started with a phone call Victoria Lane made at 6:40 in the morning, before most of Sterling Tower had woken up. She sat in her corner office on the 48th floor, already dressed in a tailored navy blazer, her honey blonde hair pinned back with surgical precision, and dialed a number she had saved under a false name in her contacts 3 weeks earlier. The man on the other end was someone Derek had found for her, a freelance network security consultant, which was a polite way of saying a hacker who charged $15,000 to breach corporate surveillance systems without leaving a trace. Victoria had paid him from a personal account her father did not monitor. The job was simple: access the Sterling Tower security server. Pull the camera footage from the hallway outside floor 51, specifically footage from Tuesday and Thursday evenings over the past month. The files arrived in Victoria's encrypted inbox at 7:12 that morning. She opened them on her personal laptop, away from the company network. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. In clip after clip, Zara Mitchell appeared, walking down the dim corridor of floor 51, pushing open the heavy oak door, disappearing inside for hours at a time. In one clip, Ethan Sterling himself could be seen entering the same door 14 minutes before Zara arrived. Victoria did not know what was behind that door. She did not need to. The footage alone, a young black intern entering a hidden room on an unregistered floor with the CEO late at night, week after week, told a story that would write itself in the minds of anyone who saw it. Victoria spent the next 2 hours editing the clips into a clean sequence. She added timestamps. She attached a brief, carefully worded summary suggesting that Ethan Sterling had created a secret arrangement with a junior employee that raised serious ethical and reputational concerns for the company. Then she sent it to one person: Harrison Sterling. Harrison Sterling was 67 years old. He lived in a lakefront estate in Lake Forest, 40 miles north of Chicago, in a house that had been in the Sterling family since his grandfather built it in 1952. He was a tall man, 6'2", but age had compressed him slightly, rounding his shoulders and thinning his silver hair to a fine layer across his scalp. His face was narrow, aristocratic, with deep-set blue eyes that carried the permanent expression of a man who believed the world owed him deference and was usually correct. Harrison had handed control of Sterling Enterprises to Ethan 4 years earlier, but he retained a 31% ownership stake and a seat on the board that he exercised whenever he felt his son was making a mistake. In Harrison's world, mistakes were anything that deviated from tradition. And tradition, in the Sterling family, meant marriages that merged fortunes, friendships that served strategy, and an absolute refusal to let personal weakness become public spectacle. Harrison had loved his wife Eleanor deeply, more deeply than he ever admitted to anyone, including himself, but when she died, he sealed that part of his life shut and expected his son to do the same. Emotion was a luxury the Sterlings could not afford. When Harrison opened Victoria's email at 9:15 that evening, he watched the footage twice. Then he called his lawyer. By 11 o'clock, he had booked a private flight to Chicago for the following morning. He arrived at Sterling Tower at 8:45. Ethan was reviewing quarterly projections in his office when the elevator doors opened and his father walked in, flanked by two attorneys in dark suits carrying briefcases. Ethan had not seen Harrison in 3 months. The sight of him, rigid, silver-haired, his wool overcoat still carrying the cold from outside, immediately told Ethan this was not a social visit. "Son," Harrison said. He did not sit down. His voice carried the same flat authority it always had, the voice of a man who had spent 50 years making decisions that other people lived with. "You are destroying everything your ancestors built. For an intern." Ethan set down the tablet slowly. "You don't know anything about her." Harrison reached into his coat pocket and produced a check. He placed it on the desk the way someone places a verdict on a table, $500,000 made out to cash. "Give this to the girl," Harrison said. "Tell her to disappear. This is how the Sterlings handle problems." Ethan stared at the check. He did not touch it. "She is not a problem," he said quietly. Harrison's jaw tightened. "Then explain to me why a 23-year-old intern from Harlem is entering a secret floor in your building at 11 o'clock at night." The silence that followed lasted exactly 5 seconds. But in those 5 seconds, Ethan understood that his father had seen the footage, which meant someone inside the building had sent it. And he understood something worse. His father did not care what was behind the door on floor 51. He cared only about what it looked like. Harrison spoke again. "If that girl is not out of this building by the end of the week," he said, "I will call an emergency board vote to restructure leadership." He buttoned his coat. "Do not test me, Ethan. I built this company before you were born." The lawyers followed him out. The elevator doors closed. Ethan sat alone in the glass office. The Chicago skyline stretched endlessly beyond the windows, but for the first time it felt like a cage. The same morning, 14 miles south, Nathan Cross made his own move. Nathan had spent the past 2 weeks cultivating a source inside Sterling Enterprises. A mid-level financial analyst named Tom Reeves, 38, a quiet man with a receding hairline and mounting credit card debt who had been passed over for promotion twice in the past year. Tom was not a bad person, he was a desperate one. Nathan had approached him through a mutual acquaintance at a bar in the West Loop, bought him 3 drinks, and by the end of the evening had offered him $75,000 for internal documents related to Sterling's Lakefront, Michigan development project. Tom delivered the files on a USB drive the following week. Nathan used the information with precision. Within days, his lobbyists had contacted 3 members of the Chicago City Council, presenting data suggesting that Sterling's environmental impact assessment was incomplete. The council voted to delay the building permit. Simultaneously, Nathan fed a story to a business reporter at the Tribune. Unnamed sources claiming that Ethan Sterling was distracted by a personal relationship that was affecting his leadership. The article ran that afternoon under the headline, "Sterling Enterprises CEO Faces Questions Amid Internal Shakeup." By market close, Sterling stock had dropped 8%. The board of directors demanded an emergency meeting. Ethan Sterling was now surrounded on every side, his father threatening to pull funding, the board questioning his leadership, the media circling. Nathan Cross buying discounted shares in the background like a vulture waiting for the animal to stop breathing. And in the center of all of it, quiet, invisible, and completely unaware of the forces moving around her, was Zara Mitchell, sitting at the desk outside his office, organizing his calendar for the week. Ethan called her in at 4 o'clock that afternoon. Zara stepped into the glass office. She could feel immediately that something was wrong. Ethan stood near the window, his back to her. He was not wearing his suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows the way they were when he painted, but there was no paint on his hands today. Only tension. "Close the door," he said. She did. He turned slowly. His grey eyes met hers, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw something in them that looked like pain. "The contract is terminated," he said. The words came out flat, rehearsed, as though he had practiced them several times before she walked in. "You should leave." Zara stood very still. She did not gasp. She did not raise her voice. She looked at him, really looked, and the expression on her face was not anger. It was sadness, a deep, quiet sadness that made the room feel smaller. "You are doing what your father wants," she said softly. "Exactly the same way you hid the paintings." The sentence landed in the space between them like a stone hitting glass, precise, irreversible, cracking something that could not be repaired with silence. Ethan did not respond. Zara reached into her pocket and removed her employee badge. She placed it on the desk. Her photograph smiled up from the laminated surface, a picture taken on her first day, when the world had felt full of possibility. She turned and walked out of the office. She did not look back. Ethan stood motionless for a long time after the door closed. He picked up the badge. He stared at her face in the small photograph. And for the first time in many years, his vision blurred. Zara made it to the lobby before the tears came. She walked through the marble entrance hall, past the security desk, past the glass doors, and onto the sidewalk along the river. The October wind hit her face, cold and sharp, and she pressed her hand against her mouth to hold back the sound rising in her chest. She walked 3 blocks before her phone rang. The caller ID read Dad. She answered with a voice she tried desperately to keep steady. "Hey, baby girl," Marcus said, but his voice was different. It was weak, thin. There was noise in the background, beeping voices, the metallic echo of a hospital intercom. "Dad?" Zara's hand tightened on the phone. "Where are you?" Marcus coughed once, then again. "I'm at Rush," he said quietly. "I passed out on the bus." Zara was running before he finished the sentence. She arrived at Rush University Medical Center 22 minutes later, still wearing her work clothes, her employee badge gone, her eyes red. A nurse directed her to the 3rd floor. When she pushed open the door to room 314, Marcus Mitchell lay in the hospital bed looking smaller than she had ever seen him. His broad shoulders seemed to have shrunk into the white sheets. An IV line ran into his left arm. A monitor beeped steadily beside him. His eyes opened when he heard her footsteps. "Hey," he said softly. Zara's face crumpled. "Dad, what happened?" "The doctor." A young woman named Dr. Annika Patel, early 30s, with kind, dark eyes and a calm demeanor that suggested she delivered bad news more often than she wished, stepped in behind Zara. "Miss Mitchell," she said gently, "your father has a tumor in his left lung. We've been monitoring it, but it has grown significantly. He needs surgery, soon." Zara turned to Marcus. "You knew?" Marcus looked at her with the tired, loving eyes of a man who had spent his entire life trying to protect his child from pain. "You were flying, baby girl," he whispered. "I didn't want to pull you down." Zara collapsed into the chair beside his bed and took his hand. Her tears fell onto the hospital sheets, soaking dark circles into the white cotton. In the span of a single day, she had lost her job. She had learned the man she was falling in love with could choose his father's world over her. And now her own father, the only family she had left, was lying in a hospital bed with a tumor that could kill him. Across the city, in a private dining room at a restaurant on Rush Street, Victoria Lane sat across from Harrison Sterling over filet mignon and a bottle of Burgundy. She wore a cream silk dress. Her hair fell in perfect waves. She spoke about the Sterling legacy with reverence and about Ethan's future with the careful ambition of a woman auditioning for a role she believed she was born to play. Harrison listened approvingly. "You understand this family?" he said. Victoria smiled. "I always have." The following week, Victoria appeared at a Sterling Enterprises charity gala beside Ethan, introduced by Harrison's assistant as a close friend of the family. Photographs were taken. Victoria's hand rested lightly on Ethan's arm. His expression in every photograph was identical. Hollow, distant, like a man standing inside his own body but no longer living in it. He did not protest. He did not resist. He simply existed, moving through the days like a machine running on fading power. And in a rented office in Bridgeport, Nathan Cross leaned over his desk, studying the Sterling Enterprises stock ticker on his screen. The price had fallen another 3% since the Tribune article. Nathan picked up his phone and called his broker. "Buy another 50,000 shares, he said. He hung up and smiled at the ceiling. The takeover was no longer a possibility. It was becoming an inevitability. Sterling Enterprises was bleeding, and Nathan Cross intended to be there when it finally collapsed. 2 weeks after Zara Mitchell walked out of Sterling Tower, Ethan Sterling stopped painting. The oak door to floor 51 remained locked. The standing lamp beside the easel stayed dark. The jars of Windsor and Newton oil paint sat exactly where Zara had last arranged them on the wooden table, cerulean, cadmium yellow, titanium white, their lids sealed, untouched, gathering a fine layer of dust that would have horrified Arthur Brennan at the Lincoln Park shop if he had seen it. The half-finished portrait of the woman by the window still faced the wall where Ethan had turned it the last time he was in the room. He had not looked at it since. He could not. Upstairs on the 52nd floor, the change was visible to anyone paying attention. Ethan attended meetings, but he no longer led them. He sat at the head of the conference table with the same charcoal suits and combed-back hair, but his grey eyes had gone flat, like windows in an empty house. He reviewed documents without commenting. He approved budgets without questioning. He answered questions with one-word responses that left his executives glancing at each other in uncomfortable silence. The Ice Prince had not melted. He had simply gone hollow. Marcus Reed noticed first. Marcus Reed, not to be confused with Zara's father Marcus Mitchell, was Sterling Enterprises head of security and had been with Ethan for 8 years. He was 41, built like a former linebacker, which he was, 3 seasons at University of Michigan before a knee injury ended his football career and sent him into private security. He had a shaved head, a thick neck, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same granite as the building's lobby floor. But behind the intimidating exterior, Marcus Reed was observant in the way that only people who have spent years watching doorways and reading body language can be. He had seen Ethan handle hostile takeover attempts, billion-dollar negotiations, and a board revolt 2 years earlier without flinching. He had never seen him like this. On a Thursday afternoon, Marcus Reed stepped into Ethan's office without knocking, a privilege only he had earned after 8 years of loyalty. Ethan sat behind his desk, staring at nothing. The Chicago skyline beyond the glass wall was sharp and clear under a cold November sky, but Ethan's eyes were focused somewhere far past the horizon. "You need to talk to someone," Marcus Reed said quietly. He did not sit down. He stood near the door with his arms folded, the way he always did when delivering a truth his boss did not want to hear. Ethan's response came slowly. "The only person I want to talk to is already gone." Marcus Reed studied him for a long moment. Then he left without another word. He had worked security long enough to know that some problems could not be solved by standing in a doorway. The following Monday, the crisis Ethan had been too numb to see finally showed its teeth. Caroline Wu, Sterling's chief financial officer, a sharp, composed woman of 44, with black hair cut in a precise bob, and the reputation for catching numerical discrepancies the way a hawk catches movement, walked into Ethan's office at 9 in the morning with a folder marked confidential. "We have a problem," she said, placing the folder on his desk. "Someone has been buying our stock, quietly, through layered shell companies, but the volume is too large to hide anymore." Ethan opened the folder. The data inside showed a pattern of purchases, small at first, then accelerating, all routed through entities registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. Caroline had traced the beneficial ownership through 4 layers of corporate structure. Every trail led to the same destination, Titan Realty, Nathan Cross. Ethan stared at the numbers. The fog that had settled over his mind for 2 weeks began to thin. Nathan Cross was not just targeting the Lakefront, Michigan project. He was buying enough shares to challenge for board control. He was attempting a hostile takeover of Sterling Enterprises itself. "How much does he hold?" Ethan asked. Caroline's voice was tight. 11% confirmed, possibly more through nominees we haven't traced yet. Combined with the board members he's been courting, he could force a leadership vote within 60 days. Ethan closed the folder slowly. Something behind his eyes changed. The flatness receding, replaced by the cold, focused clarity that had made him one of the most feared negotiators in the industry. "Pull every transaction record," he said, "every communication between our employees and Titan, every email, every phone log." Caroline nodded. "There's something else," she said, carefully. Tom Reeves in finance, the analyst who was passed over for promotion last year, his spending patterns changed dramatically 6 weeks ago. New car, credit card debt paid off overnight. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Bring me everything on Reeves. And find out who else has been talking." Within 48 hours, Ethan had assembled the full picture. Tom Reeves had sold internal financial documents to Nathan Cross, the documents that led to the blocked building permit and the Tribune article. But Reeves was not the only leak. The deeper Ethan dug, the more a second thread emerged. Victoria Lane's personal assistant, Derek, the nervous young man who had been tracking Zara's movements for months, had also been in contact with Nathan Cross's office. Derek had provided Nathan with details about Ethan's schedule, internal staffing changes, and the existence of the mysterious Floor 51. In exchange, Nathan had promised Derek a position as Vice President of Communications at Titan Realty once the takeover was complete. The connection between Victoria's surveillance campaign and Nathan's corporate assault was not coincidental. It was coordinated. Victoria had given Derek access to the information. Derek had passed it to Nathan, and Nathan had weaponized it. Ethan called an emergency board meeting for Wednesday at 10 in the morning. The Sterling Enterprises boardroom occupied the northeast corner of the 52nd floor, a long, glass-walled room with a polished mahogany table that seated 14. By 9:50, every chair was filled. Harrison Sterling sat at the far end, his posture rigid, his silver hair catching the cold morning light. Victoria Lane sat 3 chairs down, her expression composed, but her fingers pressed flat against the table in a way that suggested she was holding herself together by force. The board members, a mix of veteran executives and outside investors, settled in with the quiet tension of people who sensed something significant was about to happen. Ethan stood at the head of the table. He did not begin with pleasantries. A screen behind him illuminated with the first slide. A diagram of shell companies, financial transactions, and communication logs connecting Nathan Cross, Tom Reeves, and Derek to a systematic campaign to destabilize Sterling Enterprises from inside. "Over the past 8 weeks," Ethan said, his voice steady and precise, "a coordinated effort has been underway to sabotage this company's operations, manipulate our stock price, and position Titan Realty for a hostile acquisition." He advanced through the evidence methodically. Transaction records, phone logs, emails between Derek and Nathan Cross's chief of staff. A recording, obtained legally through the company's internal communication monitoring policy, of Tom Reeves discussing the USB drive delivery with a Titan associate. The room was silent. Then Ethan turned toward Victoria. The individual who initiated the internal surveillance that provided Titan Realty with its initial intelligence, he said, is in this room. Victoria's face went white. She opened her mouth. That was Derek's decision, she said quickly. I had no knowledge of any communication with... You hired the hacker who breached our security system, Ethan interrupted. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. You extracted the footage from floor 51. You sent it to my father. He looked at Harrison briefly. And the information your assistant gathered during that surveillance was shared with Nathan Cross, who used it to attack this company. Victoria looked around the table for support. No one met her eyes. The board members stared at the evidence on the screen. Harrison Sterling sat motionless, his expression unreadable. Your employment is terminated effective immediately, Ethan said. Legal will contact you regarding the non-disclosure violations. Victoria stood slowly. Her chair scraped against the floor, the only sound in the room. She picked up her bag. She walked to the door. No one spoke. No one followed. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded in the silence like an ending. After the meeting adjourned, the boardroom emptied slowly. Members filed out, murmuring to each other. Caroline Wu stayed behind to organize the documents that would be forwarded to the SEC. Tom Reeves had already been escorted from the building by Marcus Reed's security team that morning, and Harrison Sterling remained in his chair. Ethan was gathering his files when his father spoke. Ethan. The single word stopped him. He turned. Harrison sat in the same rigid posture he always held, but something in his face had shifted, a softness around the edges that Ethan had not seen since childhood. You look like your mother, Harrison said quietly. The words hit Ethan like a physical force. He set the files down slowly. Harrison continued, his voice lower now, almost fragile. Eleanor always knew who to trust. She could see through anyone. He paused. I never had that gift. Ethan stood still. You told me painting was a weakness, he said. The sentence was not an accusation. It was a fact, delivered the way a man places a stone on a scale to test its weight. Harrison looked down at his hands, old hands, spotted and veined, resting on the polished mahogany. I was wrong, he said. 3 words, spoken quietly, almost inaudibly. But Ethan heard them as clearly as if they had been shouted from the top of Stirling Tower. 3 words he had waited 18 years to hear. Harrison stood slowly. He buttoned his coat. He walked toward the door. Then he paused, one hand on the frame, and looked back at his son. The girl, he said. Zara. Ethan waited. Harrison's voice carried something it had never carried before, not command, not authority, but something close to regret. Keep her, Ethan. Do not repeat my mistake. The door closed. Ethan stood alone in the boardroom for a long time. That evening, he drove south. He did not take the town car. He did not call Marcus Reed. He drove himself in a dark grey sedan through the evening traffic on Lakeshore Drive, past the glittering lights of the Loop, past the quiet neighborhoods of Bridgeport and Bronzeville, until he reached Rush University Medical Center. He parked in the visitor lot. He sat in the car for 3 minutes, his hands on the wheel, his breath fogging the windshield. Then he stepped out into the cold November air and walked into the hospital. He had known about Marcus Mitchell's condition for 5 days. Caroline Wu had flagged an insurance inquiry that passed through the Sterling benefit system, Zara's family medical coverage under the now-terminated contract. Ethan had personally contacted the hospital's billing department and arranged for the Sterling Family Foundation, his private charitable fund, separate from the company, to assume full responsibility for Marcus Mitchell's treatment. Surgery, chemotherapy, rehabilitation, everything. Room 314 was quiet when he pushed open the door. Marcus Mitchell lay in the hospital bed, thinner than before, his broad frame diminished by the white sheets and the IV line trailing from his arm. Beside him, in a hard plastic chair pulled close to the bed, sat Zara. She wore a simple grey sweater. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She had clearly not been sleeping. A paper cup of cold coffee sat untouched on the bedside table. She was holding her father's hand when she heard the door open. She looked up, her eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" The question was not hostile, it was stunned, the voice of someone seeing a person they had already begun to let go. Ethan stepped inside. He looked at Marcus first, the thin face, the labored breathing, the quiet dignity of a man who had spent his life carrying weight he never complained about. Then he looked at Zara. "I came to fix a mistake," he said. He placed an envelope on the bedside table. Zara did not touch it. Ethan continued. "The hospital has been contacted. Your father's surgery, chemotherapy, and full recovery program will be covered by the Sterling Family Foundation, not company funds, my personal foundation." Marcus opened his eyes slowly. He studied the young man standing at the foot of his bed. Tall, well-dressed, carrying himself with the careful composure of someone accustomed to authority, but visibly, undeniably nervous. "Who are you?" Marcus asked, his voice thin. Ethan met his eyes. "I am the man who owes your daughter more than I can repay," he said. Zara's hand tightened around her father's fingers. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. Ethan turned to her fully. "I did," he said, "because you were the only person brave enough to tell me whose life I was living, and it was not the one I wanted." He paused. The hospital room hummed quietly. The monitor beeping, the ventilation hissing, the muffled sounds of the hallway outside. "I finished the painting," he said. "The one of the woman by the window." Zara's breath caught. "Do you want to know who she is?" Zara nodded slowly. A tear slid down her cheek. Ethan's voice softened to something barely above a whisper. The voice of a man who had spent his entire adult life hiding what he felt, finally allowing one truth to escape. "It's you," he said. He used a word he had never used with her before. "It was always you." Marcus Mitchell watched from the hospital bed. He did not understand the full story. He did not know about Floor 51, the paintings, the contract, the scandal, or the corporate war that had raged 52 stories above the city. But he understood one thing with the clarity of a man who had loved one woman his entire life. The way Ethan Sterling looked at his daughter was the same way Marcus had once looked at Denise. And that was enough. 6 months later, autumn returned to Chicago. The trees along the Riverwalk had turned amber and copper, their reflections shimmering in the dark water below. Michigan Avenue was alive with the kind of golden afternoon light that made the entire city look like it had been painted. Buildings glowing, windows catching fire, the sky above Lake Michigan stretching wide and impossibly blue in that brief, perfect window between summer's end and winter's arrival. Tourists walked the magnificent mile with scarves loosely draped around their necks. Office workers carried coffees in gloved hands. The wind off the lake was cool but not yet bitter, the kind of wind that reminded you the city was alive and breathing. Sterling Tower stood at the center of it all, the same glass and steel monolith it had always been. But inside, everything had changed. Sterling Enterprises had not merely survived the crisis, it had emerged stronger. The Lakefront Michigan Development Project received full city approval in August after a revised environmental assessment cleared every regulatory hurdle. Construction began in September. The stock price, which had cratered 8% during the Nathan Cross assault, had climbed back and then surged, finishing the quarter up 22% from its lowest point. Institutional investors who had wavered during the turbulence quietly reinvested. 2 new partnership deals with international firms were signed in the same month. And in October, Ethan Sterling appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine. The headline read, "The CEO Reborn, How Ethan Sterling Turned Corporate Crisis into Reinvention." The article discussed the takeover defense, the SEC investigation into Titan Realty, and the boardroom restructuring that followed. But the detail that generated the most attention, the paragraph that was shared more than any other on social media, was a single sentence near the end in which Ethan Sterling publicly acknowledged for the first time that he was a painter. The revelation arrived not through the Forbes article itself, but through what Ethan did on the same day the magazine hit newsstands. He opened floor 51. The renovation had taken 3 months. The dim hallway with its amber lights was gone, replaced by clean white walls and polished concrete floors. The heavy oak door had been removed entirely, leaving an open entryway framed by recessed lighting. The windows along the far wall, the same windows that had overlooked the river in the days when the room was a secret, were now fitted with skylights that poured natural light across the space from above. And on the walls, arranged chronologically from left to right, hung every painting Ethan Sterling had created over the past 18 years. Landscapes he had painted at 17, abstracts from his early 20s, dark and turbulent, full of the grief he could not express anywhere else, portraits of strangers he had sketched from memory, and at the center of the far wall, larger than all the others, the portrait of Eleanor Sterling, the woman with the sad, knowing eyes, now displayed beneath a small brass nameplate that read Eleanor Grace Sterling, 1958 to 2006. She taught me that beauty is never weakness. The employees of Sterling Enterprises were invited to visit the gallery during an open afternoon. They came in groups of 3 and 4, stepping through the entryway with the cautious curiosity of people entering a space they had been told did not exist. Helen Park from Building Administration stood before the portrait of Eleanor for a full minute without speaking. Finally, she removed her reading glasses and whispered to the woman beside her, "I worked for that man for 10 years and I never knew." A junior analyst from the 44th floor, the same floor where Zara had once organized files, stared at an abstract piece of swirling indigo and silver and said quietly, "He painted this?" Caroline Wu, the CFO, walked the length of the gallery without stopping, then returned to the portrait of Eleanor and stood there with her arms crossed and her eyes soft in a way her colleagues had never seen. Ethan stood in the middle of the gallery as the employees filed through. He wore no suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows, the way they always were when he was in this room. Beside him, her hand resting lightly against his arm, stood Zara Mitchell. She wore a simple black dress and her hair was pulled back the way it had been on her very first day at Sterling Tower, though everything else about her had changed. She watched the people move through the space and felt something tighten in her chest. Not sadness, not fear, but something warm and full and almost overwhelming. The room that had once been the most hidden place in the world was now open, and the man who had hidden inside it was finally standing in the light. Across the city, that same week, Marcus Mitchell walked out of Rush University Medical Center for the last time. The surgery had been a success. Dr. Annika Patel had removed the tumor completely, and after 4 months of chemotherapy and 2 months of recovery, the scans were clear. Marcus had lost 20 pounds during treatment, and his frame, once broad and strong, was thinner now, his cheeks slightly hollow, his hands lighter on the wheelchair armrests, as a nurse rolled him toward the hospital entrance. But his eyes were bright. And when the automatic doors slid open and he saw what was waiting at the curb, he laughed for the first time in longer than he could remember. It was not a town car. It was not a limousine. It was a 1998 Ford F-150 pickup truck, forest green with rust around the wheel wells, and a dent in the passenger door that looked like it had been there since the Clinton administration. Ethan Sterling stood beside it, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, an outfit so foreign to his usual appearance that Marcus blinked twice to make sure he was seeing correctly. "What in the world?" Marcus said. Ethan opened the passenger door. "You told the nurse last month that real men drive trucks," he said. "I found one." Marcus shook his head slowly, as Zara helped him from the wheelchair into the cab. The leather seat creaked beneath him. The dashboard smelled like old coffee and engine oil. Marcus ran his hand across the steering wheel and looked at Ethan through the open window. "You're not half bad, Sterling," he said. Ethan smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "Coming from you," he said, "that means everything." The months that followed carried the quiet rhythm of lives reassembling. Victoria Lane left Chicago without announcement. She relocated to Los Angeles and took a mid-level position at a boutique public relations firm, a company small enough that her name did not appear in industry headlines. No one at Sterling Enterprises heard from her again. Her father, Richard Lane, quietly withdrew from all joint ventures with the Sterling family and retreated into semi-retirement. Nathan Cross fared worse. The SEC investigation, built on the evidence Ethan and Caroline Wu had assembled, resulted in a formal enforcement action. Nathan was fined $4.2 million and barred from serving as an officer or director of any public company for 5 years. Titan Realty, its leadership gutted and its stock price devastated, was acquired by a West Coast development group for a fraction of its former value. Nathan Cross disappeared from the Chicago business scene entirely. Harrison Sterling came to the gallery once a month. He never announced his visits, he simply appeared, usually on a Sunday morning, when the building was nearly empty, and walked the length of floor 51 alone. He always stopped at the same painting, Eleanor's portrait. He stood before it for 10, sometimes 15 minutes, his hands clasped behind his back, his silver hair catching the skylight. He never spoke during these visits. He never touched the frame. But the security guard who monitored the floor, a young woman named Keisha, 26, who had only been with Sterling for a year, told Marcus Reed one afternoon that she had seen the old man's eyes turn red every single time. "He just stands there," Keisha said, "and then he leaves." Marcus Reed nodded. "Some conversations don't need words," he said. Ethan named the gallery the Eleanor. The brass letters were installed above the entryway in December, and on the same day, Ethan announced the creation of the Eleanor Sterling Art Scholarship, an annual competition for children from underserved communities in Chicago, with the winner receiving a full scholarship to the School of the Art Institute. The inaugural ceremony was held on a Saturday afternoon in January. 47 children between the ages of 8 and 16 filled the gallery, holding sketchbooks and colored pencils, their eyes wide as they walked past paintings created by a man most of them had only seen on television. Harrison Sterling attended. He stood at the back of the room beside his son, watching the children draw. A boy of 9, small and serious, sat cross-legged on the gallery floor, copying Eleanor's portrait with a blue crayon. Harrison watched him for a long time. Then he leaned toward Ethan and said, so quietly that only his son could hear, "Your mother would be very proud." Ethan reached over and took his father's hand. Harrison did not pull away. They stood like that for several seconds, father and son side by side, holding hands for the first time since Ethan was 14 years old. Zara did not return to Sterling Enterprises as an employee. Instead, she enrolled in the MBA program at Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern, her alma mater, on a full scholarship funded by the same foundation that had paid for her father's surgery. She completed the program in 18 months, graduating with distinction. Upon completion, she was appointed Director of Community Programs for the Sterling Family Foundation, overseeing education, arts, and healthcare initiatives across Chicago's South Side and West Side neighborhoods. She built partnerships with 12 public schools. She launched a free after-school art program that served over 300 children in its first year. She secured a grant from the city of Chicago to expand the program statewide. When a Tribune reporter asked her in an interview how it felt to go from intern to foundation director, Zara smiled. "I didn't get here because of who I'm marrying," she said. "I got here because someone once told me that strength is not about hiding who you are. It's about being brave enough to live as who you are." Marcus Mitchell retired from the CTA that spring. His final shift on Route 63 ended at 6 in the evening on a warm Friday in April. Several regular passengers had brought cards. One elderly woman who had ridden his bus every morning for 11 years handed him a small gift wrapped in newspaper, a keychain with a tiny silver bus charm. Marcus held it in his palm and cleared his throat 3 times before he could say, "Thank you." He spent his retirement volunteering with a new program funded by the Sterling Family Foundation, teaching young adults from difficult backgrounds how to drive, how to maintain a vehicle, and how to show up for something every single day, whether they felt like it or not. Every Sunday morning, Ethan drove the green F-150 to Marcus's apartment on the south side, and the 2 men sat at the small kitchen table eating black beans, cornbread, and eggs, while Marcus told stories about Denise, how she sang in the kitchen, how she braided Zara's hair every morning before school, how she made the apartment feel like a castle even when the rent was late. Ethan listened to every story. He never interrupted, and sometimes when Marcus spoke about the way Denise laughed, Ethan would glance across the table at Zara, who had her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, and understand with a certainty that required no words that some people enter your life not by accident, but by design. On a Tuesday evening in late October, 1 year and 13 days after a broken elevator changed everything, Ethan led Zara back to floor 51. The gallery was closed for the night. The skylights showed a darkening sky above, purple and deep blue, with the first stars beginning to appear over Lake Michigan. The paintings hung silent on the white walls, each one carrying a piece of the man who made them. Ethan walked slowly through the space, Zara beside him, their footsteps the only sound. He stopped at the far wall, the final painting, the portrait of the woman by the window. It was finished now, fully, beautifully finished. The woman stood in golden afternoon light, her curly black hair lifting gently in an invisible breeze, her shoulders straight, her face turned slightly toward the window where the Chicago skyline stretched across the horizon. Her expression was peaceful, not smiling broadly, but carrying the quiet, steady warmth of someone who has found exactly where she belongs. Beneath the painting, engraved into a small brass plate mounted to the wall, were 10 words. "The room I never showed anyone, until you." Zara read the inscription. Her hand rose to her mouth. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small, black velvet box. He lowered himself to one knee. The gallery was silent. The paintings watched. The city glowed beyond the windows. "Zara Mitchell," he said. His voice trembled. The Ice Prince, the man who had fired executives without blinking, who had faced down hostile takeovers and SEC investigations, and his own father's ultimatums without a single crack in his composure, was trembling. "You walked into a room I hid from the entire world," he said, "and you turned it into the place I want to invite the entire world to see. You healed me when I did not know I was wounded. You showed me that strength is not hiding who I am. It is being brave enough to live as who I am." He opened the box. Inside, a diamond ring caught the gallery light. Simple, elegant, a single stone set in white gold that sparkled like a piece of the frozen lake outside. "Will you stay in this room with me?" Ethan said. "Forever?" Zara looked down at him. The billionaire the world called cold. The artist the world never knew. The man who had pushed her away and then driven across the city to find her again. The man who painted her face when he thought no one would ever see it. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but her smile was the brightest thing in the room. Brighter than the ring, brighter than the gallery lights, brighter than the Chicago skyline burning gold beyond the glass. "Yes," she said. It was always yes. Ethan slid the ring onto her finger. He stood. He pulled her into his arms, and they held each other in the center of the gallery, surrounded by 18 years of hidden paintings and one truth that could no longer be contained. Outside the tall windows, Chicago blazed beneath the autumn sky, the river reflecting 1,000 lights, the wind carrying the sound of the city across the water, the towers standing tall against the dark, like monuments to every dream that had ever been built on ambition and risk and the stubborn belief that something beautiful could rise from concrete and steel. And on floor 51 of Sterling Tower, in the room that had once been the most secret place in the world, two people stood together in the light, a girl from Harlem who had fought for everything she ever had, and a man who had hidden his heart behind glass walls until she taught him that the bravest thing a person can do is let someone in. The room was no longer a secret. It was home. You know, after everything Zara and Ethan went through, I think the lesson is simpler than most people expect. We all have a floor 51. Maybe it is not a room full of paintings. Maybe it is a dream you stopped talking about because someone told you it was foolish. Maybe it is a part of yourself you hide every morning before you walk out the door, because somewhere along the way you learned that showing the real you was too risky. Ethan Sterling carried his secret for 18 years. He built walls so high that no one could reach him, and he called that strength, but it was not strength. It was fear, wearing a very expensive suit. Then a girl from Harlem walked through a door she was never supposed to open, and she did the one thing no one else had done. She looked at the real him, and she did not look away. You do not need $1 billion to change someone's life. You just need to be the person who stays when everyone else walks away. Whatever you are hiding, whatever dream you folded up and put in a drawer, take it out. It is not a weakness. It is the most honest thing about you. If this story touched your heart tonight, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you do not miss the next story. And drop a comment below telling me where you are listening from tonight. To everyone watching, wherever you are, whatever you are carrying, I pray that God blesses you. I pray He gives you the courage to open your door and the right person to walk through it. If you believe that, type Amen in the comments. God bless you all. I will see you in the next story.